Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Lethal Weapon as well as the latest episode of Blindspot. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below and I include the time slots when I start talking about each of the respective shows that I'm talking about. For example, if you don't want to hear what I have to say about this week's episode of Lethal Weapon, you can just look in the description down below and skip to the time where I start talking about this week's episode of The Blindspot. But first of all, let's talk about Lethal Weapon. In this episode, the new case that Riggs and Roger get is basically a Texas Ranger was basically transporting a suspect named Wade Davy, and basically they get attacked, and, well, some people bust Wade out and ends up killing this Texas Ranger. This in itself, this feels like the case itself kind of spirals into something else when you end up finding out that the people behind busting this guy out might be part of like the LAPD sheriff department, so some dirty cops. Which you have Captain Avery being like, yo, handle this very delicately. There are many just different things that went down. Like, for one, we had an instance where Cruz is kind of in there, like, he goes with Bailey, and he's kind of a little, kind of nervous and stuff like that, and Bailey's like, yo, you okay? She's like, it's okay. And then the lady behind the desk basically calls him out. It's like, yo, what did he do now? It's like, oh, yeah, he's a cop. Really? Oh, the LAPD must be desperate if they brought him on a cop. And you had on as a cop, and you have Bailey being like, yo, can you just calm the hell down? And I was like, all right, like, there's this whole situation, can you help us out? Like, basically, like, okay, could you, focus on your work? And it's one of those instances, it's something I want to see. Like, we haven't seen much of it. It's like, the fact is, Cruz has a past, and it's like, we see peeks at it here and there. Like, this is only like the second time it's really come up. But it seems like, he was a troublemaker back in the day, to the point that the lady behind the desk recognized him. It feels like a situation where he was probably in the sheriff's station a lot, for the lady to recognize him and call him out like that. So, and also the whole being a cop thing must be like a recent development for it to be like that big of a shock to her. So he must not have been a cop for that long. That's why I keep thinking like that's going to pop up at some point, like his past, like a lot of stuff. At some point he's going to have to confront his past, or his past is going to come to confront him, something like that. So it was like a little thing in the episode, but it was very interesting to me. But essentially, the person who runs the sheriff department is kind of the head person. His name is Reed, played by Malcolm Jamal Warner. I saw his name at the beginning. I was like, holy crap! And then, which was cool, but at the same time, it's like, oh, he's playing a D-bag character, because apparently him and Avery actually have a past, because he's like, yo, I see you and your people are digging into my men, like trying to check things out. It's like, yeah, that if you do that, there's certain things from the past, the past should stay dead, but it's like, you never know, like certain things that I'm sure that you'd like to keep quiet or could easily pop up and kind of ruin everything. And it's like, oh crap, so Avery's not the clean-cut person you thought he was. Apparently he did some shady stuff in the past, even to the point he went to go talk to Trish. It's like, yo, he's like basically bringing it down, like it's something about me that happened between me and, like, about our past back when me and Roger were partners. He even tells Riggs the truth. He ends up telling essentially what happened is, back in the day there was a guy, a very bad guy, that the evidence that kind of ties him to a crime was tainted. So Avery, working with Reed, ended up taking the dude's, like, a hair sample from his cell or something like that, and framing him for a murder, so he got sent to jail. And so that's what this is all about. That's what, he was getting, that's what Avery was being blackmailed about. And Riggs was kind of like trying to make him feel better, like, yo, you do realize that you are a good cop, don't ever think you're not. But he's like, you are going to have to tell Roger. And he finally tells Roger, even though Trish is like, hey, don't do that. He finally told Roger. And Roger, as obvious, would be super pissed. Because a big overarching theme of this episode was like, you either did it or you didn't. Like, kind of like the difference between right and wrong. Like, yes, Trish kept bringing up the point of there's a gray area with everything. It's kind of a point that she brought up earlier in the episode. Because she was basically rehearsing for trial, for like a trial that dealt with one of her clients, and it's like, Roger was like, "Oh, did he do it or not?" And then you had Trish being like, it's not that clear and cut." And he's like, yeah, it is. Either he did it or he didn't." And that's the mentality that Roger had because he's very by the book. And it's like, it's a situation where it's like, yes, Avery did a very dumb thing, but it was for the right reasons. Even Trish is like, you don't know how many people, that guy was a bad guy. There's no telling how many people Avery saved by doing that. It's the age old situation. I feel like I use it a lot in these podcast type of things, but it obviously it still fits the scenario of do the ends justify the means. In fact, it was for a righteous reason, but he still went about it the wrong way, which is what pisses Roger off. Well, Trish kind of says, like, what makes her the most mad is because it's Avery, the person he trusted, his partner, a close friend and confidant. So it's kind of like being betrayed by someone, he's trusted for so long. Because to him, it brings their whole partnership into question, because it's like, oh, you did it for this one. Okay, so what's to say you didn't do it for other? Who were there others? And Avery's like, oh, there weren't. I was like, oh, it was just this once. He's like, oh yeah, just this once. Because for Roger, all it takes is that one time. It's like, yes, it's like, yeah, you might bend the rules a little bit, especially when it comes to working with Riggs. He's bent the rules and probably bent the rules a little bit in the past, but it's a situation where it's like, I never broken the rules, and doing what Avery did crossed the line, so like I say, it's a gray area, because it's like, it's one of those situations where you wouldn't want a cop doing that, no matter how guilty the person is. The whole legal system is in play, for things to be handled properly. I mean, because even Trish says it herself, it's like, the system's broken. We both know that. We're both in this whole law enforcement system, and we both know that it's not a perfect system. And it's like, even if that is the case, because Roger's like, he should at the very least have told me sooner, because that way I could have found a way to nail him legitimately. Because it's like, oh, you're only coming to tell me now because you're getting blackmailed. So it's one of those situations where you have Riggs being the more understanding person, because he's like, he understands the circumstances, and it's like, he's like, it doesn't change the fact is that Avery is a good cop. I mean, other people, like I said, it's such a gray area, because it's like, one side of it could be like, yeah, he's a good cop. Another side of it's like, no, he used and abused his power. So it's like, no, he's not a good cop. It just takes that one mistake, a very huge mistake, to kind of shatter all the good work that they've done. Avery does want to make up for it though, so he's like, you know what, I'm a sign my resignation, and he even meets with Reed, and even like ends up basically making him confess to the fact is that his share that one of the people at his department, Barton, is the one behind all of it, that he was the one that killed that Texas Ranger. Because there was a moment earlier in the episode when Riggs and Roger were chasing after the guy Davey. When they caught up to him, trash truck happened to get in the way, and then you hear fired, and then Riggs comes past the truck, and he sees Barton over the guy. The advice like, oh, you killed him because you wanted to cover your tracks. And then there was a guy sneaking up behind Riggs and Roger, and then Barton ends up shooting him. So at that point, my mom was like, oh, is he actually not a dirty cop? I was like, maybe he actually is a good cop. And it's like, no, he's a dirty cop. Especially when that conversation later on between him and Roger, where he was kind of like, yo, like, what did you tell him? He's like, yo, the fact that he's like, I basically told him my suspicions that I think you're a dirty cop and stuff like that. He's like, oh, maybe I could you get me a lawyer, how I get in good talks with your wife or something like that. And which it bothered Roger, but Roger kind of kept his cool and just kind of bumped him out the way. You even had that moment later on when Riggs got super pissed about it and was just waiting outside of his house. He's like, oh, what are you doing? He's like, oh, yeah, just, there's these robberies around, just trying to do a good job and just make sure you're okay and everything. Essentially, he's like, yo, you and me, he's like, oh, you're trying to stick up, you're here to fight Murtaugh's battles or something like that. And he's like, it's like, he's like, oh, you guys are a little too sensitive. And basically Riggs is like, yo, the Murtaughs are my family. So it's like, you messing with them, it's like you messing with me. I'm like, yeah, Riggs. And then he was just kind of like, it's like, you and me, Riggs, we're the same. And Riggs is like, no, we're not. The difference between us is I haven't killed a cop yet. And it's like, ooh, and drives away. And it's like, wow. But then, luckily, everything kind of worked out in the end when Avery ended up getting captured by Barton. Barton set it up so that the guy who Avery sent to jail, because the guy got out of jail early because he's super sick, and it's like, oh yeah, handing him the gun and be like, yeah, you kill Avery this way. It looks like I tried to get here in time to save you, but it's like not quite enough in time to stop this from happening. But Riggs and Roger end up saving him. I don't know if the dude ended up dying. He was already shot before, but then like he was standing up and he had his gun in his hand. Avery took Roger's gun and shot him, but it looked like it was in his shoulder. But like I said, we don't know if he's necessarily dead. And then Riggs went up against Barton and kicked his ass, and then had the gun to his throat. Like, oh yeah, you said we're the same. Like he's about to pull the trigger, but doesn't, and just like, yeah, we're not the same. We're different, and ends up arresting him. So that kind of worked out. Not kind of worked out, definitely worked out. And you had the conversation between Avery and Roger of like Roger being like, no, you can't, you have to keep this secret, because it's like if he went through what he was going to do, it wouldn't have meant it wouldn't have meant taking down that sheriff, taking down Reed. It wouldn't have meant taking it. It would only meant taking himself down, as well as undoing all the good work him and Rogers done, because it would bring into question every other case he've ever had. So it's like, no, what you're going to do is you're going to keep that to yourself. It's like, I guess because it seems like he is a dirty sheriff, like, head of his department. Reed Malcolm Jamar Warner's character, it does seem like he was a dirty, but at the same time, it's like he didn't know that Barton was going to shoot that cop. Like he didn't know the whole circumstance was going down, but it was a situation where it was like it kind of spun out of control. But it seemed like he was trying. He made it seem like, yeah, like, like the whole situation back then with him and Avery, he's like, yeah, he doesn't lose sleep over it or anything like that. But it does seem like you do see a moment where Avery's kind of looking at it and you almost see like a little sadness in the dude's face. So it's kind of like it does bother him what he did. He talks about it. He was talking like he didn't lose any sleep over it, but it kind of seems like he does. And, so it does seem like he is a dirty cop. Whether they're going to go after him, I don't think they are. They're probably going to keep a close eye on him, but that's probably as far as that's going to go. Because, I mean, there's no way to take him down without taking Avery down with him. So, I don't know. It might be a circumstance where they look at it where it's like, yeah, Barton was kind of, well, Barton and his people, like some of those other cops. Not all of them in the department are dirty, but Barton as well as some of the ones that work with him. I'm sure the guy he shot earlier in the episode was probably one of the cops that was working with, or maybe it was just some thug he hired. Maybe it wasn't all cops that did that job with him trying to save Davy, maybe breaking Davy out. Maybe there were just other people he hired too. I mean, I don't know. That never really came up that person that was with him was a cop. That never came up as like, oh, I saved your life and everything. So, I mean, I don't know. Probably the fact is it never came up that he was a cop. So it was probably just someone he hired to kind of do that, to kind of get him off his trail. But, I don't know. I'm wondering to see if that's going to be something we see kind of pop up later on or not. There was that whole angle at the beginning of the episode. I'm surprised that didn't. I guess it kind of fit with the theme of the episode to a certain extent, but the whole like Riggs not paying respect to those cops at that park. Because they're like, oh yeah, we're giving you a fine and stuff like that. It's like, oh, he's like, oh yeah, my dad always told me about like, cops wearing shorts or something like that. And then it's like, it's like, what happens if you guys have a suspect, but he's in a car? What are you going to do? Are you going to call 911? And it's like, he's being such an asshole to them. It's like, holy crap. I thought that was going to pop up a little bit more in the episode, but it's like, no, it kind of only allocated to that one thing. But I guess, I mean, maybe it'll pop up in a future episode, but also it seems like it was just kind of establishing the fact is that Riggs was the first to be like, hey, this might be an inside job with the whole Davy situation. He did meet with that the Texas Rangers kind of boss, or someone that the guy was also a Texas Ranger too. Makes you wonder, is that going to play a part? Is that guy going to help him play a part in the whole Miranda thing? Because it's like he basically offered Riggs a job. He's like, oh, if Riggs is ever interested in coming back to Texas or whatever, he can always use a guy like him. So it's like, I feel like that might play a part in the whole Miranda thing, because especially like the last time we touched on that storyline, it seemed like there was a lot more to it than that. So there's a lot more questions that need to be answered about that. So maybe he'll play a part in that in the future. We'll just kind of have to wait and see. An interesting thing, it's kind of, once again, I bring it up every time, and I like that. Like, it's a shame they're not part of the episode. They're just kind of like commercials. But the whole Scorsese having to do an autopsy on the dog, because it's like to prove that, like, oh, the same bullet that was killed using the deputy was the same thing that killed the dog, because it was connected to the fact is that, like, one is like, oh, trying to pay someone, be like, oh yeah, because someone couldn't keep their mouth, because someone in the department couldn't keep their mouth shut, a dog got killed for it, just to kind of set an example. Be like, yeah, from now it's your dog. Next time it might be you or someone you care about. That kind of idle threatening type of thing. And he was like super upset about it. It's like, really? You cut up humans all the time? He's like, yeah, but humans is just kind of my job. And it's just like, humans are my comfort zones. Animals are just, no. And then kind of coinciding with it is a commercial. And you have Bailey there being like, oh yeah, how did you figure out the whole thing about the dog or whatever? I mean, about the bullet. He's like, oh yeah, these striations and stuff like that. So it's kind of works kind of like a fingerprint. And he looks, and it's just like, oh. And he's like, you already knew. He's like, then why did you came down here to cheer me up, didn't you? She's like, no. She's like, and if you kind of give me that face again, I'm going to essentially mess him up. And then he's just like, what are you doing right now? I'm like, dude, it's slow, but it's surely happening. She's warming up to Scorsese. Slowly but surely. And then just all around, love like the whole bowling situation when that kind of played out the way it did. Rogers got his perfect score of 300. And then basically one of the cops is like, yo, like, that was kind of messed up. That was wrong or whatever. And then essentially Roger's getting ready to throw down and stuff like that. And Riggs is like, yo, are you trying to get a fight started with other cops at a bowling alley? And then Roger's kind of smiling like, yeah. And Riggs is like, okay, I was just making sure I understood the situation right, because it seemed like he was smiling too, because it's like, that's pretty cool. And then he's like, oh, okay. And all the other cops are kind of getting riled up about and get involved too. And Riggs is like, okay, when you're about to start a fight and you're surrounded by a whole bunch of cops, the first rule you got to keep in mind is take the first blow. Always land the first hit, and turns around and punches him, and it kind of turns into a little brawl. But kind of coinciding and bringing that back later up in the episode at the very end, it's like, yo, what's up with this whole bowling situation? And it's like, Trisha's like, yo, don't worry about it. I put $1,000 on my husband. It's like, if he wins, if he gets this perfect 300, you have to give $1,000 to whatever charity of his choice. And it's like, oh, then obviously vice versa. And then like Rogers come back out a little bit. He's like, nah. And you have Riggs being like, nah, I'm putting $2,000 out on a. And you see Roger up there kind of nervous and everything. And then Riggs is like, it's okay, don't worry, you're gonna get it. He's like, I might have lied about that. He's like, what are you doing about? He's like, I might have fudged you a little bit. I might have rounded up. He's like, what, you didn't get the perfect game? He's like, I got 290. It's like, okay. He's like, the fact is, you get this, that won't matter that you got 290 before. All that's going to matter is, yeah, you got this 300 here. So it kind of, the whole thing about getting on Avery about the past, like, it's like, hey, he covered that up in the past. It's like, it doesn't matter that you're covering it. All that matters is if you kind of prove the point now. He's like, you have to do this for you, for Trish, for the LA department, and specifically, you have to do it for me, because I don't have the $2,000 to cover this, so you better make this happen. And fortunately, Roger does make it happen. So overall, a very good episode. Like I said, it's just interesting learning that little bit about Avery. It's just kind of nice that you kind of got that little touch of learning a little bit about him, because I feel like captain characters, I mean, depending on shows, don't get me wrong, there have been other shows where it's like, oh, you've gotten an opportunity to learn about captains and, kind of crime drama-y, police procedurals like Montgomery from Castle, or even Mayfair from Blindspot. I know, I guess, really that would have been a perfect segue if I had just stopped there, so. Which I'm not going to, because I have to close this up, obviously. But nevertheless, like I said, a very good episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Blindspot. This week's episode, essentially kind of an older tattoo that Patterson kind of deciphered, basically came up. And essentially, it led to a container where this guy had come out of. His name is Anton. He's part of this terrorist group, which apparently they've crossed paths with this group before. Obviously, this is their first time coming across with him, at least I think. It's like the particular group he's a part of, I'm not, but like definitely this team has had crossed paths with him. So it's like the way they were referencing it sounded like it was something from the show. But me, with my terrible memory, I couldn't place exactly where specifically. They were talking about the fact is that they were almost beheaded, which sounds vaguely familiar, but dude, I don't know. I'm terrible. I say it before and I'll say it again. I have terrible memory. So, they finally track down the Anton dude, and lo and behold, they actually cross paths with Keaton, the CIA guy. Apparently this is a CIA operation type of thing, which, the moment Jane meets him is like, holy crap, because Weller kind of brings up the fact is that obviously he's crossed paths with him, but this is like this is Jane's first time meeting Keaton since she, escaped from the CIA. And she is super not okay with that because she's like, oh, you tortured me and everything. And she was like super pissed at Kurt, like, oh wait, you told me you didn't know. And I was like, Jane, let me explain. I met him after like what had happened with you, and like he even tells her later on, yeah, I almost snapped the dude's neck when I found out about it. And she's like, oh, I didn't know about that. She's like, that's pretty cool that you were willing to kill a guy that did something like that to me. Because it's like, no matter what Kurt says and tries to pretend, like he doesn't hide for the fact that he cares about Jane. He legitimately does. He has and always will. I mean, granted, obviously he cared a lot about her in a different way in the past because he thought she was Taylor, but it still doesn't change. Like I said, even with everything that's happened, it still doesn't change the fact that like his feelings for her now, he cares about. He's very protective of her. I mean, take the Roman stuff for example, because it's like, Roman needs to get out because he's remembering that particular memory of being locked up in the orphanage and whatnot. And it's like, Jane's like, he wants to get out, so I can help him. I can be there. And Kirk's like, no. It's like, why not? He's a bloody murderer. He's done a lot of terrible things. It's like, the fact of the matter is, she's like, well, what about me? I didn't know anything either. It's like, but you're different from him, which is like I said, they had different reactions. Like I said, it's kind of interesting, which it comes up later on, but I'll get to that. Well, later on, but the fact is that, it's like, even with all his memories gone, Roman still can kill people without batting an eye. Like he did last episode. He killed those dudes and it was like nothing. Like he wasn't like, oh my God, what did I do? It's just kind of like he did it and it was just standing there. And like I said, you saw the look on Jane's face, like, holy crap, that he just did that. Like, Jane has always fought people, but it's always been in self-defense type of situation. It's never been like, she never hurt anyone unless she needed to. So that's what I mean of kind of a situation of like, the feelings are still there. So he does like treat her a little bit differently, even with it all being said and done. But Jane and Keaton do talk. She's like, the fact is, like, you can't be trusted. You did what you did to me. You didn't interrogate me. You tortured me. He's like, dude, that's my job. I was hired. I was told to come in, get whatever information from you, especially because it's like, do you know look at who you are. You're literally the daughter of like a big like a woman who leads one of the biggest terrorist groups around. So it's like, come on, really? It's like, what I did will never pop up because I'm with the CIA. That type of stuff is kind of like not written down. It's like, it doesn't exist. Just like you don't exist. That's why it was able to happen, is because she doesn't exist. I mean, that's why Tom was able to do the things he was able to do, just because he was able to, if it came down to it, he could have made Jane disappear if he wanted to, so it kind of makes sense since they both work for the same organization and stuff like that. Granted, Tom was the director. I think Keaton might be the next. I think he is. I think when he popped up again, he referenced the fact is that he is Tom's replacement. So he is like the new director of the CIA. I think. I don't know. Because it kind of gets in your head because you're like, but the director shouldn't be out in the field like that. But then it's like, well, you look at Kurt. Kurt's still a field agent, even though you really shouldn't be. That position is more so behind the desk type of thing. Because Mayfair didn't really get out into the field. I mean, obviously with certain exceptions and stuff like that. But nevertheless, moving on. It turns out that basically there's going to be an attack by Anton's group. Well, his son has a condition that he needs a new heart transplant. So they're going to give him a new heart, give his son a new heart in exchange for Anton telling him about the attack. But sadly, things don't go well when it turns out that his son, Henrik, dies on the table, like during the surgery and whatnot. Because he made it pretty blatantly clear earlier when he was talking to Jane. He was like, yeah, the worst thing that could ever happen is if your child dies. And it's like, that's the worst thing that could happen to a parent. And for Keaton, he wanted to be like, no. We lie to him. We pretend as much as possible. Like, hey, your son's still alive and everything. But then it's like, Jane's kind of like, no, he's going to find out sooner than later and it's better that we kind of just tell him and try, and Kurt kind of goes down that route, tells him up front. Keaton still tries to lie at first, but Kurt was up front like, no, your son's dead. They tried their best. At first, he's super pissed at Keaton, but then he's like, oh, Jane's talking to him and everything because Keaton wanted to save not Keaton. Anton wanted to save his son, but he was like trying to give his son a second chance. It's like he didn't want his son to be a part of the world that he's in. It's like, hey, let his son have a choice, a life of his own. And Jane kind of uses that to be like, oh, what would your son have wanted? He's like, so my son dies and now you want me to help you? He's like, screw you. Essentially, this city can burn for all I care. Make everyone feel the way I'm feeling. But essentially, they ended up tracking it down, ended up finding out that basically it's connected, like they're putting the bombs or whatever in basketballs. And it's like, why basketball? There's no specific games going around. And then he starts thinking about what Jane starts thinking about what Anton said, and it's like, whoa, and then realizes about Keaton's daughter. Apparently, she had a basketball game, and so they go to try and rescue her, kind of clear everything up. It was crazy when obviously, like, he had an agent there to kind of keep an eye on her, and she's trying to get away, but the door's locked. Turned around, catch a bullet today, and I was like, ugh! And that's gotta suck because she's like, she's a teenager, but still, that's too much for anyone to handle. Holy crap! And she's running for her life. Fortunately, everything worked out, and she was rescued. They were all stopped. I like that fight between Jane and that dude that was attacking her in the school. It ended a way I wasn't expecting. She kind of threw that little, I don't know what you call it, the little weight. And she ended up hitting him in the chest. I kind of scrunched up a little bit when she grabbed it because I was like, oh, you about to swing in this? Oh, you hit him in the chest. I thought you were going to go straight for his face because straight to the face would have probably killed. I mean, it might have just simply knocked him out, but I was assuming it was going to kill him. So, I feel like I don't bring that up enough. This show has very good. I'm going to struggle with this word because I always have a hard time saying it, choreography. I said it. I still stumble. Like I had to pause a little bit. It's like I cannot say that word right. I don't know why. It's a word that I just stumble on anytime. So I usually try to avoid saying it as much as possible. So, but nevertheless, this show does a very good job of his actions. I feel like I don't compliment on it enough for that. But there was even that moment where Jane ended up saving Keaton and his daughter's life, and Keaton's like, thank you. She's like, I was just doing my job. So it seems like it's hard to say where things sit at this point. Like, I'm sure she will always be pissed at him, but I think there is a part of her that understands no matter what he was doing his job. I don't know if it still doesn't justify doing what he did, but it is within it's kind of what he was hired to do. It's kind of his job. So, but I'm sure in her, I don't know. It's hard to say where she sits on that. It seems like she's okay. It doesn't seem like she hates him. I guess because you see a different side of him because it's like, oh, there's this guy there doing this to me. But it's like, here he is holding his little girl to try and do everything he can to protect her. He even commented, he's like, do you think didn't have anything better to do than like torture you? It's like, I missed out on so much time with my wife and my daughter because I had to waste time torturing you. So it's like, don't you think it's like, that's kind of an asshole thing to say, don't you think? Like, kind of like, oh my God, like, my time could have been spent better than torturing you. It's like, shut up. Why do you have to phrase it like that? You're saying that specifically just to be a dick. Now, coinciding with that is the whole Roman angle. It's like, oh, trying to get Roman's memories back, obviously, but it's like, it's not working. And Jane, her and Roman have an interesting conversation because Roman kind of brings it up because I think I brought it up last episode, but definitely this episode is like, oh yeah, she's like, Jane had to start from scratch. There was no one there to kind of act as the building blocks for. Eventually, she had Oscar there to kind of help with that, but from the very beginning, she was on her own. She was like, oh, start off with something simple, like, do you like coffee or tea? Which I don't remember, but the way that seems like something, that choice in itself seems like that might have been something from Borden. So I don't know. That seemed like a Borden thing. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it's something like Kurt did that, but it's like, I would think, because out of anyone, Borden was like the first person that Jane ever really opened up to. It kind of interestingly enough, in both lives, prior to losing her memories, after the whole Orion situation, he was the first person one of the first people she latched onto and got associated with and cared about, and that was kind of the first people that opened up. It must have been weird for him. Like, it's something I didn't even really think about. It's gotta be, when you look back on the series, it's like, it had to be weird sitting there pretending like he didn't know her, like, he's helping her learn all this different stuff about her, even though he knows Jane better than Jane knows herself. When you actually think about it, it's like, holy crap. I mean, then again, it's kind of the same situation with Oscar. I mean, that didn't end a very nice way, but essentially, the conversation came up. It's like, why would our mother do this to us? Oh, the first conversation was, do you think our mom loved her? And you have Jane kind of being like, yeah, in her own way, which does make up the question, does Shepard actually love them? Like, I mean, like, on some level, you kind of think that maybe there was kind of a little bit of a motherly instinct when she found them, that she did legitimately care for them. But at the same time, it's like, when you look at where things are now, it's like, maybe she never really cared about them. Maybe they were always meant to just be little soldiers for her to control and manipulate, type of thing. I don't know. Like sadly, at the end of the day, they are just soldiers in this fight. Like, because in her mind, she's thinking she's doing the right thing. Because she's like, I'm not trying to destroy America. I'm trying to rebuild it and make it great again. So in her mind, I guess in her mind, it's just kind of like, yeah, me and my children are fighting together. So it's kind of like, I guess in her mind, it's not like it isn't 100% like there are soldiers, but it's like, oh, they're soldiers. We're soldiers together in this great fight to save the U.S. essentially. So I guess I can see it, but there is a part of me that wonders, like, was it really true love, or did she always see them as nothing but potential soldiers for her war? You know, because it makes you wonder, how far back has Shepard been planning this? Because, I mean, maybe like her in the past might coincide, because, you know, we know she has some kind of connection to Kurt because he's part of the plan and everything, especially because Kurt gets the feeling like he knows her from somewhere. So it's like, maybe she wasn't always like this. Maybe like something, obviously, and just like Borden joined Sandstorm because of what happened to him. And so, like, I'm sure she had her own reasons as well. Well, no, I forgot. I almost forgot. She does have her reasons. We kind of explained it. It's like the reason why she can't even have children of her own is because of where she grew up, was because of a government thing where it's like the water was tainted, like it was not properly cleaned. Like basically certain groups were like just dumping waste in there, and like she was drinking the water, and she like basically had to have her ovaries removed when she was like 16 or something like that. So it's impossible for her. I think either her ovaries or her uterus, and it's impossible for her to have children. So that, but I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that. But I'm sure that was kind of like a certain breaking point for her. It's like something pivotal from her past, but I'm sure something else kind of coincided. Like, was that just the starting point, or was there much more to it? Like I said, I feel like that was probably the foundation, and there was much more built upon that. So kind of moot the point I was kind of making there. But the other thing was, I'm like, oh, why would she do this to me? And Jane's kind of like, well, maybe she thought it was the only way she can keep you on her side. You know, Jane basically talking about herself. Because it's like, you know, because she even has a conversation with Kurt where she was like, you know, what happens when Roman finds out that I'm the one that took away his memories? He's going to hate me. And Kurt's like, you did what you had to do. You wanted to protect your brother. You wanted to give him a second chance. And like kind of coinciding with Anton and his son Herrick. Like he wanted to give him a new heart, you know, just to legitimately give him a chance at life, so he doesn't have to fall in the footsteps. And it's like, that's what Jane did for Roman. She just wanted to give him a second chance, like, so he's not bogged down by like all the stuff that he went through with Shepard or their past, because it's like forgetting everything. Like, Jane is happier being who she is now. She might not remember everything about her past, but it's because she doesn't want to. She doesn't want to remember who she was prior. She wants to just be who she is now, because it kind of made her into a better, she prefers the person she is now, and she just want to kind of give Roman that same chance. But with the whole situation trying to get Roman's memories back, they ended up bringing in a profiler named Karen. She's someone that Nas knows, and it's like she ends up talking to Roman because Roman keeps reliving that memory of being trapped in that orphanage in that particular room, clawing at the walls and trying to get out. And it's like, it's one of those kind of makes my skin crawl type of things. It's because of that. Like, even in the cell he's in right now, he's clawing at it, and you can see his nails kind of getting a little bloody underneath and cracked a little bit, like they're going to pop off because he's scratching so hard. And it's just like, because Karen does bring up a point, because he's like, I need to get out of here. She's like, why? He's like, I don't deserve to be in here. She's like, how do you know? You don't remember anything, what you've done. Like, maybe you do deserve to be in here. And ends up basically getting into his memories and tapping into that moment. And essentially, the memory shows it obviously being locked in there. But then he ends up, before getting locked out of there, he ends up pulling off a piece of the wood, kind of like in the shape of a shard. And ends up, that one of the guys takes him to the room, and it's like, oh, the boy who beat him up and took his coin. He's like, oh, what's that behind your back? You got another coin? Roman pulls out that wood piece and starts stabbing the kid repeatedly. And then just like nothing. And the soldier just kind of looks on at him like, oh, like, kind of what he wanted. I guess what he was doing was constantly taking Roman out of that room and putting him back in that room with the kid. Or, I don't know, maybe they just locked him in there the entire time. it was just, I guess it was kind of the point was to kind of just break Roman. And that's kind of what Karen basically says, that, after running everything through, she's like, yeah, Roman's broken. She basically breaks it down and says he has an antisocial personality disorder, that basically Roman doesn't have empathy, that basically there won't be a way of fixing him. That's like, oh, well, we can help, it's like, okay, maybe, I can be there for him. And, it's like, oh, well, how we go about helping him remember? It's like, nothing. Don't help him remember. If he remembers, there's a good chance that he will, like, his psychopathic tendencies, we kind of seen a little bit like that they will come back. This kind of coincides as why he felt nothing when he killed those people last episode, and what Jane was kind of shocked, is like because of that empathy, like lack of empathy, and it's because even Jane was like, but his memories got wiped and stuff like that. But she's like, no, this is something that's been ingrained in him since he was a little kid. Even wiping away his memories doesn't get rid of that. Like, it's kind of become a part of him because it was such a big foundation of him growing up. It's essentially the same thing. She gave an example of, like, she was at a particular hospital and, like, none of the babies were crying. It's because they cried for so long and no one ever gave them any attention or held them, that they just gave up crying because it was like they figured there was no point. It's kind of a similar thing with Roman. Like, there was no one there to nurture him or care for him, and he just kind of his only way of dealing with it is just to completely stop caring altogether. And it seems like that is, and she's like, my best recommendation, lock Roman up for the rest of his life until he gets, like, to get the help he can, because it's like, being out here, he can't get any help. And it's like, Jane's like, she doesn't know what to do, because it's like, no matter what, Roman is her brother. But it's like, Karen was talking like she was known for a matter of fact that things are going to work like this. But then Patterson says something, she's like, well, the fact of the matter is, because Jane is like, she's like, she can't be objective in a situation because Roman is her brother. She cares about him, and it isn't going to be like, oh, we should do this. She won't be taking a very objective, won't be looking at it from an objective point of view. She's looking at it from a sibling point of view. It's like, that's my brother. I don't want him just locked away for the rest of his life. He can be fixed. It's like, I want people to see the good in him. Like, I know it is. Like, we know there's good inside of Roman. Like, she remembers it from when they were kids. Like, even now, like, there's parts of that, I'm sure she can see it in his eyes and stuff like that. There is still that kindness in him. And then Patterson points out, it's like, well, Kurt wasn't always the most objective when it came to you, and he ended up bringing out the good in you. So it's like, you can do the same thing for Roman. But then also we had Patterson breaking the leopard tattoo and ended up figuring it out. Apparently it's some game. I forgot what the game is called. I don't even halfway understand, like, how the game works. To me, like, in the complexity of whatever it is, it kind of reminded me of Chinese checkers. Like, I'll tell you ahead of time, I don't understand how I've seen Chinese checker played, but it's like a few times, but even then it's like, it's not like can't even tell you how you play the game or what the rules of it are. But it's just like some kind of game that Roman and Jane probably learned about sometime when they were living in South Africa, because this game is pretty popular there. And essentially, like, Roman had been doing some stuff with the sugar cubes and stuff like that. And Patterson, when she looked at her pills falling on the floor, she started picking them, but she was like, wait a minute. Roman's subconsciously been playing out this game, not even realizing that's what he's doing. So it helped her figure out the pattern. The pattern led to it was Braille, which led to a social security number that led to some woman named Kat, who's part of some kind of biker gang. And then lo and behold, when they pull up one of the pictures, it's of her and Roman together. So that, to me, I saw a little peek at the beginning of the next episode. It was literally like a repeat of last episode, where it was just kind of like, oh, Roman, there, and Jane's in front of him, which kind of already got my brain thinking, like, I'm sure that was just kind of like setting up with it. I'm going into the next episode blind, but I can only assume, because I brought it up before, like, what if Roman goes into the field? And it's like, that's definitely got to be where this is going, because the only person Kat's going to trust is Roman. So what they're going to have to do is try to get him to pretend to be who he was before. Should probably have to try and tell him as much, because he's going to have to fake, being that person, not unless he talks about the fact that he lost his memory, and the only memory he has is of Kat. Because the fact of the matter is, this tattoo was removed from Jane. It does make you wonder for what particular reason. Was it on purpose? Was the fact that the tattoo was removed was because it was, too insightful into the information about their organization, giving them too much of a look into Sandstorm's plan, or was it because the tattoo being missing? No, because the fact is they only got the clue because of Nas's insider, which she still, goes back every once in a while. The place that gets to drop off information, she still goes there. Like, she's not even sure if the insider is still alive or not, but she still goes there just in case, And she's not willing to give up, essentially. But I'm sure that's what next episode is going to be about. Like, Roman having to pretend to be Roman again to get the information, because it's like none of them can actually go confront her, because it seems like the only person, obviously, she has any real connection to is Roman. And it's like there's no telling, like, if the FBI gets involved, that she'll actually give up any information. So obviously, to me, that seems like the obvious route of where that was going. I brought it up before because I thought it'd be kind of interesting, because it'd be like, oh, Roman kind of becoming the new Jane and kind of going out in the field. But as we know, he's very unstable. So I'm sure things definitely aren't going to work out. I'm sure like Nas and Kurt are going to think about what Karen says and be like, well, he can't really be out in the field because those psychopathic tendencies might kick up again. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. Other parts in this episode, one thing is the whole Tasha and Reed thing. It's like, yo, let's work past the whole awkwardness thing. And it's like, no. It's like, yeah, no, we're good, right? Yeah, we're good. So, yeah, I got to go work. Yeah, me too. Like, oh, it's like, oh, yeah, Reed and Tasha, I want y'all to go do something. And Tasha's like, no, I should go help Patterson. He's like, okay, you do that. Just trying to avoid working together. Even Reed's like, okay, so can we talk about it? She's like, no, I don't want to talk about this. He's like, come on, dude, I was in a vulnerable place. I was on some meds. I was just caught up in the moment and everything like that. It's like, but they do get to the point where they're in the elevator and like, let's go for a drink. And Reed's like, I'm tired. She's like, come on. He's like, fine. She's like, just promise me that you won't try and kiss me afterwards. Make out with me after. He's like, come on. But they sit down, they have a drink. It's like, yo, we're all good. It's like, oh, that lady's trying to hit on you. He's like, really? He's like, yeah. You tapping out? She's like, I'm gonna go. And so Reed's there chatting up the lady, and you see the look on Tasha's face. It's like the feelings were mutual. She just got scared. It's that moment of just like it got sprung on her. If like if Reed had probably taken the steps and eased her into it, that would have been fine. But it's like, obviously the feelings are there too, because like, she saw him with talking to a woman. You kind of saw that sad look on her face. It's just like, it's a situation where it's like, Reed is legitimately her best friend, kind of her partner in this whole situation. Like, in FBI, more often than not, that's her partner too. So it's like, she doesn't want to jeopardize that with a relationship. Because truth be told is, we don't actually know that much about Tasha's past relationships. We don't know whether she likes relationships, whether she's had a lot of success with them or not. I mean, just because she's single now doesn't mean anything. It's like, because, I mean, we've known Reed's relationship because he was dating Sarah for a while last season, so. But it's kind of like, oh, man, Tasha, you should have, like. But like I said, like, more so than anything, it's because she got scared, because it's like, whoa, what did you just do? Whoa, we're just crossing the boundaries. It's like, yo, we were just best friends, and in 1 second, everything just changed because you just kissed me. So, and anyone in their rightful mind would be scared, because it's like, they didn't even talk about that transition. It just happened. And so it's enough, I'm sure, to scare anybody. So I'm very interested to see where that goes. It might be one of those type of situations where it's like, obviously she kind of like acts like she's okay, but then she's like, oh, you're going out with another girl, huh? Oh, are you okay? She's like, yeah, I'm totally okay. What? I'm not worried about it. Like, yo, go out, have a good time type of situation, like pretending like she's okay when she's actually hurting on the inside. It's like, I mean, maybe you'll get to a point where Reed will be like, yo, no, like, Tasha, tell me how you really feel. And it's like they finally make out in this magical moment or something. Hopefully it's not going to be a situation where it's like a life or death situation that pushes her to be like, yo, Reed, I really feel this way about you. Hopefully it doesn't turn into a situation kind of similar to the whole Kurt and Jane situation, where it's like, oh, he's dating Nas, but there's still that little bitty feeling about Jane. I mean, obviously the feelings for Jane still being there. A more accurate comparison, I guess, would be like the whole Allie situation. Even when he was with Allie, there was still Jane, even though he wasn't really like, oh, no, I'm there for you. It's like, no, there's still Jane in your heart. So, and speaking of Allie, that was another thing in this episode. It's like, Allie ended up bringing up the fact is that she's got a job offering in Colorado, and she's like, oh, should I take it on? She's like, okay, if you don't want me to, I won't take it. But, you have Kurt being like, no, take the job because it's an opportunity that you want, you should take. But it's like, what does that mean for him? It's like, it's not, he doesn't have a problem with her having a boyfriend and stuff like that. It's nothing even like that. It's just like, yo, that's fine. But it's like, especially because Kurt wants to be a part of this child's life. But if it's like the baby moved all the way to Colorado, it's like a long distance dad. It's like, because a lot of stuff has to be, because she's like, oh, we could talk about it. It's like they definitely have to talk about it because like, what does that mean? Because he wants to be a part of his daughter's. I mean, I said daughter, child's. Like I forgot. Do they even know the child's gender at this point? I don't think they did. But nevertheless, he even went through the trouble of setting up a little room and everything. And then Allie's like, wow, this is like too much. And it's like, to me, because she was having that conversation earlier, she was like, yo, like we need to talk. He's like, I promise I'm not gonna miss another appointment. I was like, okay, don't tell me. I didn't know, like when they were in the room, I was like, okay, don't tell me she's gonna drop the bomb and be like, oh, it's not Kurt's baby or something like that, which I think she went ahead and was like kind of like, yeah, you're the only person I've been with type of situation. I don't know. I don't know. It was just in the back. I was like, oh, don't tell me it's not Kurt's baby. It's like, oh, it's his. But I was like, oh, don't tell me you're going to leave. It's like you decided to go to take the baby away or something like that, which, I mean, it kind of seems like it might be, you could argue like, oh, it's kind of like that, but it's like, no, like she's not trying to take their child away from them. It's like she still wants Kurt to be a part of the child's life too, but things are complicated. It's just like, she has her own goals and dreams in mind of like where she wants to be when it comes to her career. So this is an opportunity. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. Like, what does that mean for Kurt going forward with everything, with his job, with his personal life, stuff like that. Just overall, a very good episode. A lot of developments, not just on overarching story-wise, but even just amongst the personal characters. There's that whole thing with Patterson and her headache type of thing, where she's still not she's not back at 100%. I wonder, is that going to turn into something? Because the moment she started, like, had that migraine, and it's like you could hear that piercing, like, sound, and then she dropped her pills. So I was like, oh man, don't tell me Patterson's about to pass out. Like, don't tell me they actually did something to Patterson and she didn't realize it. Like, they implanted something in her brain or something. I was like, no, it's not like that. But it does make you wonder, will that turn into something going forward or not? We'll just kind of have to wait and see. Like I said, a very good episode. Just interested to see how everything plays out. But that's really all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.